My name is Serena Caldwell. I'm 29 years old. And for as long as I can remember, I was the one who didn't quite fit the wrong shade in a painting everyone else called perfect. I grew up in a 4-bedroom colonial in Naperville, Illinois. My parents had good jobs, a clean driveway, and a Christmas card photo that looked like a catalog. From the outside, we were exactly what a family was supposed to look like. From the inside, I was the only one who seemed to notice the cracks. My sister Melissa was 2 years older, same dark blonde hair as my mother, same way of tilting her head when she laughed. They moved through the world together like two halves of the same sentence, finishing each other's thoughts, borrowing each other's clothes, sharing a language I was never taught. I had brown hair and green eyes that nobody else in the family had. When I was 12, I asked my mom about it. She said, "You got the Irish side, honey." Then she changed the subject. I told myself that was enough of an answer. On Melissa's 16th birthday, my parents rented out a rooftop venue downtown, 42 people, a DJ. A custom cake with her name spelled out in gold fondant. I counted the guests because I had nothing else to do. I spent most of that party near the exit, holding a cup of Sprite, smiling when someone looked my way. On my 16th birthday, we had dinner at Olive Garden. Me, my parents, Melissa, and my aunt and uncle who lived nearby. My mom ordered the tiramisu for the table as dessert and called it my birthday cake. I laughed along with everyone else. I was good at that. When Melissa graduated high school, my dad cried. I saw him wipe his eyes in the second row and I thought, that's real. That's not performance. I filed that away somewhere quiet. When I graduated, 2 years later, he clapped. He took a photo. He said, "We're proud of you, Serena." He said it the way people say it when they mean they're relieved. College was where the gap stopped feeling like a soft bruise and started feeling like a fracture. Melissa had been sent to Indiana University. Full support, tuition, room and board, everything. When my time came, my parents sat me down and said they could contribute $8,000 a year. I got into DePaul. I took out loans to cover the rest. By graduation, I owed $64,000. I worked 20 hours a week at a coffee shop and still needed to defer payments twice in my mid-20s just to stay above water. I asked my dad once, just once, why the difference. He said the family finances had changed between Melissa's enrollment and mine. He said it with such calm certainty that I almost believed it. I didn't ask again. Every Thanksgiving, we drove to my grandmother's house in Rockford. Big old farmhouse, long table, everyone squeezing in. My grandmother had a way of seeing things. She'd sit at the head of the table and watch, not always talking, just watching. She pulled me aside once, I must have been 19, and held both my hands in hers and said, "You are more loved than you know, sweet girl. Just not always by the right people." I didn't understand what she meant. I thought it was just something grandmothers said. She passed away when I was 24. Stroke, fast, unexpected. The grief hit me in a way I wasn't prepared for. Like losing the only soft place in a house full of hard floors. 3 years later, everything fell apart at the exact place it was always going to. A family dinner table. It was October when I got the call. My cousin phoned me on a Sunday afternoon, voice careful and measured in that way people get when they're about to say something that changes things. She told me my Uncle Raymond, my mother's older brother, had been diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's and that he was reorganizing his estate. That part was news but not a shock. What she said next was, "He's been trying to reach your mom about some things your grandmother left behind. Papers. And apparently your mom hasn't been returning his calls." I filed that away too. November came. My mom called me on a Wednesday evening. That was unusual. She usually texted and said they were doing Thanksgiving at the house this year, immediate family only. "Just the 4 of us," she said. "Keep it small. It'll be nice." Her voice was bright in a way that felt deliberate. 2 days before Thanksgiving, Melissa called me. We were never particularly close, but we spoke occasionally, usually surface stuff. This call was different. She started with small talk. Her job, her apartment, some renovation she was doing to her kitchen. And then, about 8 minutes in, came the turn. "Have you thought at all about the house?" she said. "What house?" "Grandma's house. Uncle Raymond's dealing with the estate stuff, and apparently there's a question about how things are structured. Mom thinks it would just be cleaner if you signed something saying you don't contest the distribution." I felt something go very still inside me. "I haven't been asked to sign anything," I said. "I know, that's why I'm asking, informally. You know how these things go. Probate takes forever when everyone's not on the same page." I told her I'd think about it. I wouldn't. She called again 4 days later, then again the following Monday. Each call had the same arc. Friendly opening, pivot to the estate, and some version of, "it would just be easier." On the third call, she said something that stayed with me all week. "Mom wants what's best for you, Serena. We all do. That's why we're saying this now, before things get complicated." The night before Thanksgiving, my mom texted me, "Come at 2, dress nice. We have something to talk about as a family." Not, "Can't wait to see you." Not, "I'm making the stuffing you like." Just, "We have something to talk about." I read it 4 times. Thanksgiving was a Thursday in November, gray and cold, the kind of Illinois cold that has no personality, just wait. I drove to my parents' house in Naperville, the familiar split level with the 2-car garage, the wreath on the door my mom replaced every season. I sat in my car in the driveway for a few minutes before going in. Dinner was fine for exactly 40 minutes. My mom had made the good china come out, which she only did for performances. My dad was quieter than usual. Melissa sat across from me and kept checking her phone under the table. The turkey was good. The stuffing was from a box. At 4:15, my mom set down her fork. "I need to say something," she said. My dad looked at his plate. "I've been carrying this for a long time, and with everything happening with Uncle Raymond's estate, it's not fair to keep going without being honest." She folded her hands on the table. "Serena, we love you. That's not in question. But there are some things about your birth that you deserve to know, and some things about your grandmother's estate that make this complicated." She paused. I waited. "Your grandmother left something in her will specifically for you, a letter, a separate account. Raymond has been handling it." Her voice was even, rehearsed. "But she also knew things about our family that we haven't discussed, and before Raymond gets involved any further, we wanted to have this conversation ourselves." I looked at her. "What conversation?" Melissa said quietly, "Mom." My mom said, "Your father and I have been the ones raising you, providing for you. We've given 29 years to this family. Whatever Grandma intended, it was before she understood the full picture." "The full picture of what?" I said. My mom opened her mouth. And then my phone rang. It was Uncle Raymond. I looked at the screen. I looked at my mom. I answered it. "Serena." His voice was warm and a little tired. "I've been trying to reach you for 3 weeks. I left messages with your mom. She told me you didn't want to be contacted." A pause. "That wasn't true, was it?" "No," I said. "It wasn't." My mom pushed back her chair. "Raymond, this isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," he said. His voice had changed. "Serena, I need you to come to Rockford. There's something your grandmother left for you that your mother has known about for 2 years. A letter, a deed, and a document you need to see. I'll explain everything when you get here." The dining room was completely silent. I looked at Melissa. She was looking at the table. I looked at my dad. He finally looked up and met my eyes, and what I saw there wasn't anger or surprise. It was something worse. Relief. Like a man who had been waiting a very long time to be caught. "You knew," I said. He didn't answer. That was its own answer. I drove to Rockford that night. 2 hours, empty highway, my hands steady on the wheel even though something underneath my ribs felt like it was coming loose. Uncle Raymond lived in the same house I'd visited my whole childhood. Small ranch style on a quiet street. The yard still tidy even though his hands had started shaking. He answered the door in a flannel shirt and handed me a cup of coffee before I'd even taken my coat off. "Sit down," he said. "There's a lot." He spread 3 documents on the kitchen table. The first was my grandmother's will, amended in 2019, 6 years before she died. I was listed as a named beneficiary. Not split equally with Melissa. Named specifically with a separate clause, separate assets, a savings account at First Midwest Bank, number ending in 4471, with a balance of $91,000, accrued over 30 years, added to every birthday and Christmas, started the year I was born. A small parcel of land adjacent to the farmhouse, about 4 acres, currently valued at approximately $140,000 in her name since 1988. The second document was a letter addressed to me, handwritten, sealed, my grandmother's handwriting on the envelope, for Serena. Open when you're ready. The third was a paternity test. I looked at Uncle Raymond. "She ordered it herself," he said. 2017. "She told me she'd had suspicions for years. She wasn't angry about it, she just needed to know." He folded his hands. "Serena, your father and your mother had been separated briefly in 1993, about 7 months. During that time, your mother had a relationship with another man. When they reconciled, she was already pregnant. Your dad, the man who raised you, he knew. Or he suspected. But he made a choice not to look too hard." The test was conclusive. The man who had sat across from me at every Christmas, every report card, every awkward dinner where I felt like a footnote, he was not my biological father. I sat with that for a moment. My grandmother had known, not just suspected, known, confirmed, documented, and then she had spent 30 years quietly, methodically building something for me, tucking money away in an account no one else knew about, amending her will, making sure that when the truth finally surfaced, I wouldn't be left with nothing. She'd seen what my mom was doing. The quiet diminishments, the favoring of Melissa, the way I was always slightly outside the circle. And she had understood the reason before I did. And instead of confronting it or blowing up the family, she had simply made sure I was protected. I opened her letter. It was 4 pages, written in her careful, old-fashioned cursive. "My darling Serena, if you're reading this, then Raymond has done what I asked, and the time was right. I want to start by telling you something I should have told you 100 times to your face. You are one of the most extraordinary people I have ever known, not because of anything you inherited or achieved, because of how you moved through a family that did not make space for you, and you stayed kind. That is not nothing. That is everything. I knew about your mother's choices before you were born. I knew the man who raised you was not your biological father. I made a decision not to intervene when you were small, because I believed your mother would tell you herself. She didn't. And as the years went on and I watched how she treated you differently, how she loved Melissa loudly and you quietly, how she made excuses for the gaps she created, I understood she never would. I set aside money for you every year since 1995, your first birthday, $100 to start. More when I could. The account has grown. It's yours. No conditions, no strings. The land is also yours. I bought it before your mother and father married. It has never been marital property. It cannot be contested. You owe this family nothing. Not your forgiveness. Not your presence at dinners where you are not truly wanted. Not your silence about what was done to you. But I want to ask you one thing. Find out where you come from. Not because you need anything from the man whose biology you carry. You don't. But because knowing your roots is not the same as forgiving your mother. It is something you deserve to have for yourself. I love you more than words, and I have loved you since the moment I held you. You were 3 hours old and already looking at the world like you were trying to understand it. You still are. That's my girl. All my love, always, Gran. I cried for a long time in Uncle Raymond's kitchen. He sat across from me and didn't say anything, just refilled my coffee and let me take as long as I needed. That is its own kind of love, the kind that doesn't rush grief or try to fix it, just stays. When I could finally speak, I asked him what happened next. The estate is straightforward, he said. The will is clear. Your mother tried to tell me you'd already said you didn't want the assets, that you were fine with Melissa receiving an equal redistribution. I have it in writing that that was her claim. He looked at me steadily. I didn't believe her. That's why I kept trying to reach you. She intercepted your messages, I said. Appears so. I drove home the next morning. I didn't go back to my parents' house. 2 weeks later, I met with an estate attorney in Chicago, a woman named Diana Cross, efficient and direct, who reviewed the documents in 90 minutes and told me the land and the account were mine, with no complications. The will is airtight, she said. There's no provision that allows for redistribution to other beneficiaries without your consent. If anyone challenges it, they'll lose. Nobody challenged it. I think my mother knew she couldn't. I called my dad the week after the estate meeting. He answered on the third ring, and for a few seconds neither of us said anything. Then he said, I should have done better by you. I know that. I know you know, I said. I convinced myself that treating you the same as Melissa would make it worse. That if we just moved forward and didn't look at it, it would resolve itself. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. I believed him. That was the hard part. I believed him, and it didn't change anything that had already happened. I told him I needed time. He said he understood. I think he did. My mother called me twice. I let both calls go to voicemail. The first message was 4 sentences of justification wrapped in the language of love. The second was 2 sentences. I did what I thought was right for this family. I hope someday you understand. I've listened to both more times than I should have, trying to find some crack of genuine remorse. I haven't found it yet. Maybe I won't. Melissa texted me in December, not an email, not a call. A text. I didn't know about the account or the land, Serena. I just knew Mom wanted things handled quietly. I didn't ask enough questions. I should have. I read it a few times. I'm not ready to respond. I might be someday. There's something in me that believes she's telling the truth about not knowing all of it. That she was handed just enough information to be useful to my mother's plan, without understanding the full shape of it. That doesn't erase how those phone calls felt, but it's something to sit with. In January, I drove to Rockford one more time and walked the 4 acres my grandmother left me. It was January in Illinois, so the ground was frozen, and the sky was the particular gray that means nothing is happening yet, just waiting. The land butted up against the back of her old property. A slight rise at one end, some old oak trees along the fence line. I stood there for a while in the cold with my hands in my pockets and thought about her saving $100 on my first birthday. Then, more the next year. Then more. The next year. 30 years of quiet, steady, deliberate love, tucked away where my mother couldn't reach it. That's what she left me, not just the money, not just the land. The proof that someone saw me clearly and chose me fully, every single year, without hesitation. In February, I made a decision I'd been circling for months. I found a DNA matching service, the same one my grandmother had used, as it turned out, and submitted my sample. Within 3 weeks, I had a result. A match. A man named in the report as a close biological relative, a half-sibling, living in Wisconsin. We exchanged 3 messages before we agreed to meet for coffee. It was quiet and a little strange, and full of the particular awkwardness of 2 people who share something fundamental and are strangers at the same time. But he was kind. His mother had told him years ago, briefly, about the connection. He'd wondered but never pushed. Now we were sitting across from each other at a table in Madison, figuring out what, if anything, to do with this new piece of information. I don't know yet what that relationship becomes. I'm not rushing it. My grandmother told me to find my roots, and I am, carefully, on my own terms, at my own pace. That feels right. The account cleared in late January, $91,412. The extra $412 were years of small interest, my grandmother's money growing patiently in the dark. I used $30,000 of it to pay off the highest interest portion of my student loans. The rest I put in a high-yield savings account, and I don't look at it every day. I'm getting better at that. At letting things be. At not needing to check and recheck whether good things are still there. The land I'm holding for now. Uncle Raymond says the farmhouse is likely to sell this spring, and the adjacent parcel will increase in value once the property's transferred. I'll figure out what to do with it when the time comes. Maybe I'll sell it. Maybe I won't. My grandmother bought it with her own money before she belonged to anyone else. And there's something in that I want to keep close for a while. It's March now. The gray has started to break up a little, the way Illinois March does when it finally decides to try. I have coffee most Sunday mornings with Uncle Raymond. We talk about my grandmother, her opinions on furniture, the way she made pie crust from scratch and acted like it wasn't impressive, how she used to sit at her kitchen table for an hour every morning before anyone else was up, just thinking. I'm learning who she was as a person, not just as my grandmother. I wish I'd had more time for that. I've started telling the truth about things I used to soften. When someone asks about my family, I say, it's complicated. When they press, I say more. I'm not dramatic about it. I just don't pretend anymore. My grandmother used to say, a clean conscience needs no maintenance. I didn't know what she meant when I was young. I think I'm starting to understand. She built her whole life that way. No lies to keep track of, no versions of events to manage, just the plain truth held steady across decades. She did one act of withholding in her life, and she corrected it with a letter and a will. I am not grateful for what my mother did. I am not grateful for the years of feeling like a guest in my own family, for the student loans taken out while my sister's tuition was covered, for the phone calls that were really auditions for my own erasure. I will not perform gratitude for the childhood I was given, because I understand now that a different one was possible, and was simply not chosen for me. But I am grateful, fully, quietly, completely for a woman who sat at the head of a table and watched, and saw everything, and spent 30 years making sure that when the truth finally arrived, I would not be left standing in it alone. She chose me every year, in $100 increments, in 4 acres of frozen Illinois ground, in 8 pages of handwritten cursive. That is the only inheritance that ever mattered. I keep thinking about that $100, the first deposit my grandmother made into an account with my name on it on my first birthday in 1995. I didn't know about it. I couldn't have. I was 1 year old and completely unaware that someone was already quietly choosing me while the rest of the house was busy choosing someone else. That's what gets me. Not the money, though the money changed real things in my life. The loans I could finally pay down, the breathing room I hadn't felt in years. What gets me is the decision she made 30 years ago and kept making, every birthday, every Christmas, without ever telling me, without needing credit for it. She just did it because she understood something that I didn't yet, that the people around me were operating on a logic I couldn't fully see, and that someday I would need solid ground to stand on when I finally did. My mother made choices too. A different kind. She kept a secret about my birth, not to protect me, but to protect what she stood to gain. My dad's trust, his family's money, the version of herself she'd built on top of a lie. And for 29 years it worked. It worked because nobody looked directly at it. My dad suspected and chose not to follow that suspicion to its conclusion. Melissa accepted what she was told without asking what was left out. And I kept explaining away the things that didn't add up, kept finding softer words for patterns that were never soft. That's the thing about living with half a truth. It doesn't feel like a lie. It just feels like your life is slightly harder than it should be, and you assume that's just the way things are. I think about the kind of person my grandmother was, what it took to do what she did. She didn't blow up the family. She didn't drag the secret into the middle of a holiday dinner. She sat with what she knew, thought carefully about what would actually help me, and then built something real with her hands over decades. That's not luck, that's character. It's a particular kind of moral clarity that says, I cannot fix everything, but I can do this one thing with integrity, and I will do it all the way. And it took persistence. 30 years of showing up for someone who didn't even know she was being shown up for. There was no applause in it for her, No validation, just the quiet discipline of caring about someone's future more than you care about keeping the peace in the present. I want to be that kind of person. I'm not there yet. I still catch myself avoiding hard conversations, still default sometimes to softening things that need to be said plainly. But I know what it looks like now. I've seen it in 8 pages of careful cursive, in a savings account started with $100, in a man named Uncle Raymond who simply refused to believe a lie about me that wasn't true. The people who wronged me are living with what they built. My mother has a version of her life that required my erasure to hold together, and now it doesn't hold together. My dad is trying to rebuild something in the wreckage of a choice he made decades ago. I don't take pleasure in that. I just observe it. What you construct on top of dishonesty doesn't disappear. It eventually becomes the thing that undoes you, in proportion to how long the dishonesty ran. I'm not free because I got money. I'm free because I finally know the full shape of what happened to me, and I have decided what to do with it. That's the only inheritance that was ever really mine to claim.